little OK button.
That was the AI summary button.
Yep.
So
You
uh,
good?
this week we were planning to have Clint Lausch from Ames talk in greater depth about how to do social media. Clint is out of town. He was delayed getting back into his town near Philadelphia by something that occurred in transit. So he apologizes. So we thought, Renee Farkas and I, that we would just chat with whoever came on and chat for the recording about the
Mm-hmm.
admissions process and about best practice and what do the people who actually log on during the session do and things like that. And Renee, I
Mm-hmm.
think you scrambled, you pulled together some notes, and I'm going to let you take the lead if you want.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Phil, and hopefully a couple more people will join in. Yeah, when I heard that Clint had that delay, I thought, well, let's just talk about the whole concept of enrollment management, right? Which is seems to have been a new term, but I'm saying to myself, I might be dating myself because maybe it's not that new. I think it's been around about 10 years. And for me, it really came about when we recognize what you just said, Phil, the importance and the emphasis we have to put on retention, and that in my experience earlier years that hadn't really been a big part of my admissions concepts, right? It was all about the new families coming in, how do we tour them, what do we do. um, so I've seen schools doing a lot more work on retention with faculty, to the point that I have a question that I like to ask schools a lot is, whose job is admissions at your school, right? And you know what the answer is. It's not just Phil's job, it's everybody's job, right?
Yeah.
And that you can start it, but you know, you need everybody's buy-in. And I think schools that are more successful do think a little bit differently about customer service, about the parent partnership, because that is the customer, right? And the parents primarily make the decision. You know, it changes a little bit more in high school, but and we all know that replacing a child is super expensive in time, energy, effort, mental capacity, right? And we already invested all of that the first time when we enrolled the child. So it's like doing double. So I hear some music, Tim. Do you?
No, I'm not hearing music.
Oh, you know what? My HomePod. Turn off Siri. You must have heard me speaking. That's really funny. I can show.
Yeah, I see Sarah. Sarah's just made a note that
Yeah, I
she's,
see somebody coming in. Yep,
yeah,
that's
Sarah
great.
Proser is here. And she said, got my camera off because I'm eating lunch. And
Ah, okay, fine.
we
So,
understand, Sarah.
so Sarah and Phil, we were just, introducing the whole concept of enrollment management, which really took over the title admissions office because we really wanted to start emphasizing the importance of retention. And for those of you who know Tim in Montessori settings, he always says a Montessori child can never be replaced. Um, but it is really tough to replace a child. So, any thoughts that you both have? Are you both using the word enrollment management? And then, lastly, the big question was, whose job is admissions at your school, and how do you communicate that? Anybody want to share anything on that?
I mean, I can definitely say that I still use admissions in my general terminology, although I would
Yeah.
say my boss probably uses enrollment director for my position more than I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, the obvious struggle is, getting everybody on board. When I give a tour, I want families to hear from our teachers about what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing, about why they love what they do. Um, I want them to hear from students even. Even students can be part of the admissions process. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Other current parents can be part of the admissions process, whether they're giving tours or just they're a phone call away if parents have additional questions, and they want to
Mm-hmm.
ask a non-employee.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I really think it is like it's an all-inclusive, it's everybody in the school that
Yeah.
has some kind of impact at least on admissions
Yeah.
and the enrollment process.
Yeah. Are you able to message that out loud? Like, do you get time in PD to stand up and talk about admissions as you open the year up? I mean, everybody wants full enrollment, right? And everybody worries when enrollment isn't full.
It's funny because often our teachers, in teachers' best case scenario is the smallest class possible because they feel like they're going to go
Yes.
furthest with a small class. So they don't like full classes. They don't think in terms of like, oh, these students in my class are helping to pay my salary. And from an administrative standpoint, I feel like it's our job to remind them that the
Absolutely.
parents are paying their bills. By sending their kids to the school. So if we can have more, better. Now we have to be careful and not overwhelm those classrooms with
Sure.
too many students. But yeah, it's difficult. I do get a little bit of time to speak. Certainly at the beginning of the school year during in-service, the week before school starts. I just recently did a PD just on email communication to our teachers to kind of give them a hey, this is important. Don't forget that this is important.
Right.
But other than that, yeah, normally I have some kind of I'm watching kids while the teachers are in PD, Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
most of the staff
Yeah.
are doing something other than being in PD.
Right. Right. Thank you for that. Anyone else want to share if you're using the concept of enrollment management and talking to all staff about, admissions being everybody's job, that it's not just that little office over there that does the tours?
Hi, I'm speaking
Hi,
through
is
my
this Sarah?
Hi, this is Sarah. Yeah.
Great.
We don't use that terminology. We're still, I guess, with the admissions terminology, but I do try and make it clear that it is everybody's responsibility and job to
Mhm.
to bring, people into our community, people that we think would be a good fit. I think something that was said in the webinar, the leadership webinar last week, was, we want people here that want to build community. And I used that on my tour on Friday. We're looking for people to join our community and help build it, make it even stronger.
That's great.
Yeah.
Really good point. And of course, what happens is if a teacher really isn't doing a good job of building relationship with the parents and building trust and giving them a feeling that their experience and their child's experience is first rate, they start making noises about this time of the year, wondering whether or not they should go elsewhere next year. They start comparing notes, and before you know it, everyone knows who's going to Sidwell Friends and who's going to Cathedral and who's going to Bullets. And in other words, they begin to literally, the impression they get is everybody is leaving this school and the whole thing's going to
I
collapse.
know. Isn't that funny? I mean, it's not really funny, but that happens everywhere, right? We hear one person and we think, oh my goodness, we're going to lose all these kids. And it feels somewhat out of control, right? When those conversations start.
And we live in an age when it's really, really easy for people to very quickly mouth off if they're unhappy, whether it's on Yelp or in Google Places or on Facebook, or just email chains. I mean, most of us probably have parents who are using informal channels among the friendship groups they build within our school on WhatsApp or however they're doing it. And they start saying something that they think will be private, and it is private, and it spreads like wildfire.
Yeah. So what about I thought it would be interesting talk about the variety of admissions kind of tour processes that schools go through. I know we all pivoted when pandemic happened and we were doing all these virtual things, which we had never thought of before. And we were able to pull them off, I think, pretty well. I thought it would be helpful if maybe some of you could just share quickly, what is your process, and are there unique things you do in that tour, like involve other parents, do panels, involve teachers, or do you just do it on your own and you're the only one that sees that person and keeps them in your database or whatever?
Everyone's being quiet.
Hi, I do. I'll
Hi,
go.
Sarah.
Hi.
Okay, finished lunch?
Sorry, lunch was great, thank you.
Good.
It's interesting because I am not the one that usually does the tours. We have a small administrative team, and our director of admissions has been out on an extended medical leave since February. So I have
Oh,
found
I'm sorry
myself.
about that. Yep.
She's coming back. The good news is she's coming back. So
Great. What is your role, Sarah? Could I just ask that?
yeah, I'm head of school.
Oh, you're head of school. Okay, great. Good.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry
So,
you got that added on.
oh yes, and it was a big piece, and I now
Yeah.
have a deep appreciation, and I've really enjoyed it because I have felt a closer connection to the families that I don't normally feel. I mean, usually I get to meet all the new families when we have orientation evening. Like I get to stand up and talk about all the the rules and that sort of thing.
Sure.
It's all the information that parents want to know. How do I drop my child off? But it's all very dry. So I've enjoyed having the opportunity to meet them sort of off the bat, and I've kind of honed my tour. But to answer your question, I tend to give a small group tour. So we tour in a group. I go into a couple of empty classrooms first, our toddler room and then our early childhood classroom. Those classrooms happen to be out on their recess at the time. And then when we go through elementary, we'll go through classrooms with children in, and we finish off, or towards the end of the tour, we'll stop. And our upper elementary teacher is also our head of department, and she quite enjoys giving a little chat. This is what the children are doing. She'll kind of annotate what they're seeing. So it's a little bit of both. So they get to hear from a member of staff, they get to see classrooms in action, but they also get to see an empty classroom.
Are you in a Montessori school, Sarah?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sounded that way by lower L and upper L.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, Sandy. Thanks for joining us. And then did you mention that you also have some administrative assistants who maybe will do some of the tours as well?
Yes, my director of admissions usually does the tours, and she's trained early childhood guide.
Okay.
Lots and lots of experience. So that's really her responsibility. I'm her understudy for her absence.
Okay, great. Well, it is fun getting to know the parents, the families too, and just the connection is a little more fun than doing spreadsheets and budgets, right?
Yes.
So Sandy, thanks for joining us. We're just beginning to talk about, we started out with the concept of, does everybody toot the horn at their schools by saying that admissions is everybody's job? It's not just the admissions director, and how important retention is. And we were just reviewing what the different processes that people have for like when the family arrives, the tour, what they see. And Sarah was just mentioning they go into empty classrooms and they go into classrooms with children. And then by the time they get to upper L, the teacher usually has a few minutes to come over. And, as Phil said, talk about why they love what they do. What are the children working on now? Do you do something similar to that, Sandy or Phil?
So we're infant preschool. So we're Montessori. So we actually just have right now, I used to do the tours, and we moved into a model where the lead teachers were taking on the tours. And so we have them see active classrooms. But we're not at the point, this is kind of one of the things we're working on, is the buy-in with the family. So we tend to be a little more casual at this point. We're changing it, where we have them come in, they tour the program. For us, they ask a lot about conflict resolution. How do we handle redirecting children? They want examples, and the teachers are very well versed in giving them examples. It's an adult-only tour. So have the folks, because the children are a little too young at this point to join the classroom progress. And we've always wanted parents to focus on what the classroom looks like without being distracted by their child. After they do the tour, again, really casual, and we're trying to tighten it up. It's a registration kind of portal that they want to go in if they think we'd be a good match for them. We do talk about who we are as a school and what their expectations are. Are
you a new school?
We have been around for 37 years, so no.
Oh, because you said you're just figuring it out.
Oh my gosh. So we were a family-run school. My mom and dad's
Okay.
founded the program. So
Oh,
very
great.
much
Okay.
hands-on, trying to look at admission differently.
Yeah.
Just because there's a need for finding the right match of families and having that buy-in. And we're in California, so also having the retention at the 4-year-old and 5-year-old level
Yeah.
is something that we're trying to analyze right now.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great.
Important point
yeah.
for Sandy's situation. In her state, not only do they have free public kindergarten, they have free 4-year-old programs.
Yeah.
We're talking about free 3-year-old programs. So if your school is dependent on younger children, that's a real threat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we age out, no one will stay with the kindergarten year. They'll go to public or private for kindergarten. So our age out is very young. So
Wow.
trying to retain that and yeah.
So you have them from like 6 weeks to 4 years
So
old?
we actually start at 12 months old. So we do the
12 months.
straight 1-year-old all the way through. We're licensed. It's our program runs through first grade entry. So technically we could have kindergarten. And people tend to leave before then because of the social and because
Yeah.
they're trying to get into the high ranked public schools or a private center or private
Yeah.
elementary.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. That's interesting. Phil, you have anything different that you do in your tours?
Yeah, I think one of the big things with COVID was switching from open houses and having parent volunteers giving tours to just me giving individual tours, and being able to customize my tour to the family's need.
Yeah.
For example, if I do, if someone signs up we're pre-K to 12th grade all in the same building. If a family signs up for a pre-K tour, I try to make sure that it's not during pre-K nap time. Because I want them to walk into the classroom to see the room as it's set up with kids in the building, in the room,
Yeah.
which is why I hate giving summer tours, to be honest. Although even when I give summer tours, which I still do, I bring an iPad with me and I have videos from all the classrooms that we're going to go to, what it looks like with kids actually in the room. Just so they can see kind of the look and feel. I want families to see the faces of our kids, how they enjoy being in the school. Want them to see the kids in uniform. We've got students coming from all different places in our area, and some have never been in a school that has a uniform. And my goal through the entire tour, honestly, is to answer all the possible questions before the family ever even asks. So when we get to the end of the tour, I can say, do you have any questions? And they typically say, no, you answered them all already. Because when I was doing open houses and I'd have like 30 people there, and I'd have, maybe 3 or 4 different parent tour guides, they'd all be waiting for me at the end of the tour because they have more questions that the tour guide didn't know the answer to. And I just know that I have that institutional knowledge from doing it so often.
Sure.
But for personal tours, it's I have a whole process from everything from when they sign up for the tour to reminders about the tour in text messages, and then a thank you email after the tour with next steps and encouragement to check out our YouTube channel so they can see more videos from things that they didn't get to see that day. I invite them to future events like our high school theater productions that they can get free tickets towards. And kind of work them into the community before they're even part of the community as much as possible so that they can get a real feel for what it would be like to be in the school.
Yep, that's great. I remember you saying that a couple of weeks ago. Do you also say it's a PK4 family? Do you take them through the whole school so they can see what the whole picture is?
It depends on the family, to be honest. It's sometimes it's our whole second floor is middle school, high school. But our elementary library is upstairs.
Oh, great. That's a good location.
Yeah. So I do sometimes walk them through and they get to see, oh man, this is like a junior college. It's so quiet and well maintained. It's 100-year-old building. So I don't walk them up onto that second floor if they kind of have that we've seen enough kind of feel
Yeah.
to it. You know what I mean? But
Sure.
because they're looking at pre-K, they can go and look at our auditorium where chapel and where the musicals and, you know, where all the productions take place and concerts. I can take them to the gym and they can see this, you know, full high school sized gym that the pre-Kers get to use.
Yeah.
So they get a pretty good sense of the whole building without having to go to the whole building.
Sure. Yeah.
So my tours take about an hour,
Yep.
but if I can make them shorter, I do.
Yep. Yep. What about family parent observations in the classroom? Do you do that? Any of you?
We do it, but not part of the not part of the tour. It is sort of part of the process of retention, I would say, but it's not part of the tour. We've just had, actually, we just had our week of parent observations last week. So now
Right, but the new parents who are touring the school do not sit in the classroom before they're enrolled? Oh, isn't that interesting? Okay. What about you, Sandy?
So we do our the way our setup is where we have six school like classrooms, but they're in 3 different buildings.
Okay.
And so there isn't a hallway that joins the classroom. So just by design, as we do the tour, we're slowly walking through the classrooms. They are seeing the children in there. We take a minute and highlight a couple of different philosophy areas or point out children that, oh, your child will be this age when they're coming, and this is what a 2-year-old is doing right now. So we'll point out things that will try to match them to it, because usually a year and a half in advance before they, their tour is very far in advance. So trying to get them to preview what's going to happen. And then we try to point out, and you see it's a mixed age classroom, and this is what the older children are doing. Do you see where they've gone? And kind of see how they work together. And so we tour them through all the classrooms. So each classroom, we have an opportunity for them to see a different dynamic, some children together, not, and we just have different spots where we talk about a tour. But yeah, they have to see it. During COVID, I had parents who had never seen the classroom the whole time they were with us for 3 years, that they never stepped foot in the classroom, and we had virtual tours. So very happy to be away from that.
Yeah. When I used to run Kingsley Montessori in Boston, and it was a requirement of our tour. So we told parents when they signed up for the tour that it would be an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. And we required it because we wanted them to see the Montessori, because we had instances where people would come in with a 4-year-old and say, how come there's 3-year-olds in the class after we enrolled them, right? Years ago. And then we extended it a little bit more, that we were able, because we were really working to build enrollment. We didn't have much going on at elementary, and we had plenty of preschool children. So we actually redesigned it that you did a fairly quick tour, but you started with upper L and came down, and then put them in the classroom of their child's age, and then got them 15 minutes later, and then a teacher would come in for 15 minutes in a small room. We would do it up to 3 parents, because that could sometimes be 6 people. And then the teacher would do a little spiel. So it was about an hour and 15 minutes, but that was we added that in over the years when we were really, at a place where we had to do some significant enrollment growth. So that's interesting. Tim, what's your experience? Do you see parents observing in schools before they enroll in the classroom? Like, I mean, Montessori, the parents sit down in the class and the child sometimes brings tea over, depending how, organized we are, or comes over and introduces themselves. And anyway.
Well, I think most of us, whether Montessori or something else, we ideally like families to spend many, many years, and ideally then get the children's children. So especially with Montessori, because it is so different from most people's experience, the norm is to just kind of assume what they're looking at is similar to schools they've seen before, whether it's preschools or elementary schools or whatever. And so we believe strongly that the first thing is the head of school ideally should be very much part of the initial intake. In other words, whether that person is doing the tour or sits down with everyone along the way of the tour. It's one of the people you sit down and meet. I definitely agree that you want to ideally have them see as much of the whole school as possible. And
Mhm.
I agree with you. You don't need the glazed look in the eye. The goal is to try to give them enough that they appreciate what they saw and they're kind of wowed by it, ideally.
Mhm.
The other
Mhm.
thing is we really believe in multi-step admissions, not come in once and if you like it, you just apply, or God
Yep.
forbid, you can just sign up. We want them to feel the sense of scarcity, the sense that in our school, we really want you to find the right match, which is where the name
Mhm.
of this webcast comes from,
Yep.
finding the perfect match, and that we're not trying to manipulate them to apply, because if they don't apply quickly, they're not going to have a space, which is what a lot of private schools do. So the
Mhm.
psychology that we recommend is, there's lots of great schools here in greater Philadelphia area, greater Oakland area, Sarasota, Florida, wherever you are. And public, private, charter, we want you to find the right fit for your child, for your family. We're really committed to investing time in you to help you to decide, do you want to proceed? Is this a school that you really feel you can see yourself falling
Mhm.
heels in love with?
Mhm.
And obviously, they're going to want to know, is their child going to like it? Are they going to like the teacher? There are a million steps along the way. So generally speaking, one of the things I don't do is the tour, whatever you call it, a tour, a
Mhm.
set, an open house, whatever it is, and whether it's for an individual, family, or small groups. To me, that's just the first date. And that for some people, that's the last you'll ever hear of them. What I appreciate about the software and the services that people like Clint offer is they're not only trying to make the phone ring, they're not only trying to let you and your staff know somebody's in the queue, and this is what they've done or not done, and this is what they told you, but you can also design either real life live experiences like, I would like to invite you to come back and bring your spouse or bring your child. We'd like for your child to have a first look at our school, if you're interested. Or we'd like to invite you to the middle school play, Phil, as you said. The idea of
Mhm.
getting them into the community early is really valuable. And of course, it's tricky in today's security environment because you
Yeah.
don't know who the devil's coming to that middle school play.
Yep.
Ideally, it may not be that you go that far before they've applied and you have some sense of where they live and so forth. But you can certainly send them videos. I notice you have a 1-year-old. Here's a video or an article about Montessori for kids from 1 and 2, the toddler
Mhm.
years.
Mhm.
Or we'd like to invite you to a class or talk we're giving about the Montessori infant or toddler. Whatever you do, and you can set this up to be automatic. And that's part of any customer relationship software these days, the idea to
Mhm.
set up funnels and steps along the way.
Mhm. Well, I like what you just said, and what Phil also said is multi-step, and that we used to say to families, give them a copy of the calendar and just say we would highlight the events and say we would love you to come to them, because the more you see us and the more we see you, so to speak, you get to see and feel our community. But we would always ask them to register if they were going to come to an event. Just call the front desk. We always had a name tag for them, and it was a name tag with a red edging on it. And we talked to our parents association and all the teachers and would say, at any events, if you see a family with the red tag, go over and introduce yourself, welcome them, ask them about their family, just to kind of create it. Because we message to our whole community that we want to be in partnership with the current parents and new parents, and getting them involved in it. And it worked really well, because when a new parent's coming into the middle school play and nobody talks to them, it's kind of like scary a little bit, right? So we instituted a fair number of those things and be ready for them, you know, and I also think when you say you're transparent and open and say we want you to come and see us as many times as you can, because that's all the process of are we the right fit for you, right? And I think families like to see that transparency rather than it's a big secret if I'm going to get in or not. It's all a numbers game, right? Which is a lot of what happens in admissions for families.
Can I also add to that and just say
Yeah, sure.
one of the helpful things is, you know, the fear of not necessarily being disingenuous, but talking in a tour about all the great things that make your school great. And then the kids get there and something bad happens,
Yeah,
or it's not what they thought it was because they've only seen the school once and they saw you at your
right.
best. So giving them the opportunity to get a real feel for the school, to get a real
Yeah.
feel for the parent makeup,
Mhm.
gives them a better way to make a better decision to whether they opt in or opt out. And
Yep.
if it's not going to work for them, you want them to opt out. You don't want
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
abrasion of them being there if it's not the right fit for them.
Right. Right. And you don't want to replace them. It's too much work.
Right.
You want to retain them. Um,
Yeah, I think
so
that's true for
go
every
ahead, Tim.
school at every age level. I mean, you know, I don't care if you're running a
Yeah.
traditional high school. You
Mhm.
don't want kids leaving before graduation because it tends to cause other kids to want to leave before graduation. But if you're running a school that
Mhm.
really is based on community and connectedness and maybe an unusual approach to education like Montessori, which definitely is not what everyone grew up with, you
Mhm.
need to get them bonded in. So
Yep.
the more they feel comfortable and the more they feel an affinity, like I found my people, this is
Mhm.
my place, the more likely it is to last longer. It will eventually,
Mhm.
they'll leave sooner or later, but the goal is as many as possible go all the way through.
Mhm. Mhm. What about we used to call retention committees. I think that's a new thing that enrollment management talks a lot about. Does anyone have a retention committee where people sit and talk about families that might be moving or leaving that, you know, we hear through the grapevine, or the child comes in and says, oh, I visited a school yesterday. um, I don't know. Do any of you do that?
We don't have any
One of
committees, but we definitely have our teachers that I ask on a
Mhm.
regular basis. If you hear anything about any
Yeah.
families, let me know. I get notifications, you know, if a student's
Mhm.
out because they're visiting another school. I have the receptionist, you know, who's
Yep.
monitoring attendance, lets me know. But
Yep.
I wish we had a committee.
Yep.
Well, Phil
Yeah. We.
said before everyone else joined was, in the ideal, many of our teachers really want a small class. And
Mhm.
we, on the other hand, are worried about making our budget.
Mhm.
They really, if they could have one or two kids, they'd be very happy. In the same way, if you're running a multi-age class, or even if you're not, even if it's single grade, second grade class, third grade, usually the teachers don't want to get into any kind of conflict with the parents. They like to be on the parents' good side. And so if the parent is saying, I'm thinking about putting them in public school, or I'm thinking of applying to this other private school, quite often the teacher, they may say, yes, but I think you're making a mistake, but they're more likely, from my experience, to either keep their mouth shut or just nod their heads and say, oh, I hope he gets in, and feel proud.
Yeah.
You know, my
Mhm.
kid got into that difficult competitive school.
Mhm.
Can
So when we ran it, oh, go ahead, Phil.
I was just going to ask, can anyone speak to whether or not their school has a policy on teacher reference letters by request?
Mhm.
So since we end at preschool, we go through
Yeah.
preschool, we do have evaluation recommendation process. Everything has to go through the office or through me. And so then I guide it toward the teacher, and That's the only kind of recommendation they can give.
Right.
Not
So-
early,
Early meaning, oh, not,
before you finish?
so no, no.
We don't have any.
Would I know if they did it? Not 100%, right? But no, it's our policy that if they have any questions, they need to come through us, and we would help facilitate a letter together.
Yep.
if needed to.
Yeah, Phil, we had a policy that they couldn't write a reference without it going through the office, through admissions, because, you know, they're a customer of the school, so to speak. I mean, we incorporated the concept of customer experience in our parent partnership work so that teachers really understood it. And we just said, you know, admissions needs to know. You can't be doing that off the side. And I don't think it happened. I think it happened a few times with teachers writing references for other teachers on the letterhead because we found them on the copy machine. But I can't recall having, I remember when it was happening years ago, and I don't recall it happening after we made the policy. But when we had a retention committee, when I ran the girls' high school, we had admin and like director level, and I think we had a teacher on it. And we just kept our ear close to the ground, but we discussed it, and we discussed a strategy, and somebody would take the strategy to contact that family. And, you know, you had to do it carefully because they have the freedom to change schools if they want to. But we wanted to find out why. Is there something that we could do different? And sometimes we could save them, you know, but not always. It wasn't always, but it was still, I learned that through enrollment management about 8 years ago. And that was a really hot topic of having retention committees. And sometimes you talk to a parent, you find out that they had inaccurate information, right? So you just never know. And it's, you know, has to be the right person contacting them though. They have to know how to have those kind of meetings because a parent might be put off a little bit, like, this is my decision, you know, so we just want to understand that. We also talked about in the retention committee, we talked about students that were not performing as well, both academically, social, emotionally, as good fits for the school, but more, what could we do to help them to try to get a child study plan in? So we did it. We didn't do it just for enrollment. Well, it was up for enrollment both ways, but we didn't do it just because we heard somebody might be leaving. We also wanted to make sure that we were true to our mission about, are there children who are doing well? Are there any children that seem to be in another world, not as engaged? And what can we do about that? And then the parents love the call, right?
Yeah. Some people call that the student success coordinator.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
So again, I think, you know, one of the things we have to remember is if a parent's unhappy and the teacher hears about it, they usually get nervous and defensive. And or if they sense that there's a problem with a child or a parent, they may feel very awkward and not be sure how to handle it. And they may or may not know that they can count on us for support. So, I mean, I think that having them really know that we've got their backs, that we understand that, you know, parents may or may not be happy all the time, that they don't have to be defensive about it, but that we don't know, we can't help.
That's right. That's an important message because in my work, I see that faculty, for the most part, are nervous about most of the parents, not all of them, but, and they don't want to be in any conflict or difficult conversations because they've said to me, I'm not trained to do this. I'm trained to work with 8-year-olds. You know, when you put this lawyer parent or something else, I'm not sure what to do and I freeze, right? And then they're pretty nervous. And if they're nervous, they're going to avoid the parent, right? Rather than, you know, joining in. But I think that what's really helpful is when schools do like a strategic focus on wanting to do partnerships with parents or family engagement. People call it different things, that you can actually talk about it in the parent association. You can actually talk about it in professional development. You can do some training. When I work with teachers, they love to role play, but in a caring, safe place. Like with we used to give them little cards that said, so this is what the parent said, and then you'd go off with your co-teacher and work out, well, how would you handle that if the parent said that? And then we come back and share in circle, because you want to kind of break the fear down that it's not so scary, or it is scary, but there are ways to get out of it. And sometimes just having sentences like, let me talk to Renee, the head of school, we'll get back to you tomorrow, or give them those type of sentences. And because I even knew in my early years, I used to have little sticky notes on my desk with certain kind of sentences that if I needed one to say to end the conversation. And the teachers are the same, right? And not all teachers also tell me, I never picked those parents to be in my class. They're here because it's the class placement of the child, right? I'm like, I know, but that's part of the whole thing. You can't say I want that child, but not the parent. But some parents and teachers just are, not a good match as far as personalities, right? But we can't, I'm sure we all pay a little bit of attention on that placement about types of parents, student learners, type of teacher, what's a good mix, but there's no magic formula to that.
Well,
And
certainly,
I think,
if in the admissions process,
Mhm.
one or both parents write, 10-page emails, either expressing their hopes, their dreams, their concerns, that should be a red flag that you better be careful what class they put them in, because they're going to write long, long emails to your teachers who may absolutely implode when they get something like that,
Mhm.
not knowing what to do. I think a big part of it is making sure your teachers really feel safe, knowing that someone in the school leadership has got their back and will
Yep.
help them through it, no matter what it is. Because it can be very scary when someone who's bigger than you, I mean, there
Mhm.
could be a parent, male or female, who's literally larger, more physically aggressive, moves into your space, becomes intimidating. I mean, that's not uncommon. So part of what we're trying to do is one, make sure the teachers understand that, our success in admission is directly tied to us having a place for them in the school. We don't want them to be sitting there scared, but we want them to be on the positive side of that, of we're in this together. And we're looking for people who are going to be really happy at our school, and we're going to be really happy that they're here. We're looking for the right fit.
Mhm.
And that's not going to be black and white. There's going to be a kid who do well in one class might not do well in another class. And so ideally,
right.
we figure it out before we have the year start.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's a real thing, because we're all humans and not everybody is best friends, right? And helping talk that out in PD, I've seen that calm teachers down, and then they're more willing to ask for help, because sometimes they don't want to ask for help. They think they're supposed to be able to do this. And I think, Phil, in the beginning, you said, you can do a great job in admissions, but if the teachers don't, it's like, impact your work. So, what about, like, we've been talking about if we use the word tour, when somebody comes in, this I'm assuming is during the week. Are people still doing open houses, and what formats are you using for that? Are they on weekends, and is that different than a tour?
We don't do open houses. We do it maybe once a year.
Mhm.
But generally our tours, we do them once a week, small groups.
Tour on the same day each week?
Same day, same time.
Yep.
We don't tend to get a lot of traction from open houses. It hasn't happened for us in the past. So, and it's usually on a weekend, you're asking staff to come in and give their time. And if it's doesn't kind of equate to enrollments, then we find that.
Where are you located, Sarah, in Pennsylvania?
Oh, Orlando, Florida.
Oh, Florida. Okay.
Yeah.
I will say there was an
So-
aspect to open houses that I appreciated, which was
Mhm.
kind of we're all in this looking at the same place together. So a large group of individuals who have signed up for the tour, and I was doing them. I did a monthly open house.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That there was this nice camaraderie. I could have my head of school come and speak to everybody all at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and give a little, kind of a speech about, thanking them for being there and all that kind of stuff. Um, it allowed me to get more students involved. If I wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, I've got a couple musicians that can play in the foyer while the, open house is
Mm-hmm.
starting. It's a
That's
really
great.
nice touch. It allowed me to have food for the open house. I, get coffee and donuts and some snacks type stuff. So there was
Mhm.
a food element that I don't have with personal tours anymore. But
Yeah.
I also had a lot of no-shows.
Mm-hmm.
There's no skin in the game to sign up for an open house. If you don't show up, it's the first thing to
Yep.
get dropped if anything else
Yeah.
happens, as opposed to a personal tour where I've given them a personal reminder. And
Mm-hmm.
I do personal tours. I use Calendly, so families
Yep.
can sign up anytime on my calendar that's open during the school day for a tour
Mm-hmm.
with some, some time in
Sure.
between.
Time. Mm-hmm.
But it allows them to personalize even when they take the tour, which works for their
Sure.
schedule.
Right.
And I've found that I get way fewer no-shows. Although I
Mm-hmm.
did have
Yeah.
one this morning.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Do you still do open houses or not
I
anymore?
I don't I mean, I think
Did it stop with pandemic?
yeah, that's right when I
Yeah.
stopped. I mean, I did, virtual tours on Zoom for a while, until we were back in
Yeah.
session. But I did 100, I think I had 176 tours scheduled last year that I did all
Wow.
myself. And so it definitely
Mhm.
takes more time,
Yeah.
as opposed to a 2 hour to 2.5 hour open house once a month. But I was still giving
Mm-hmm.
personal tours in between open houses anyway.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I said, why don't I just do this? And yeah, the percentage of people satisfied with the tour went through the roof enough for me to say open houses just aren't worth the effort.
Yeah.
Mm.
One of the things I've done literally for about 50 years is do 2 tours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Usually just after the school day is settled down, typically for an hour and a half. We recommend they don't bring their children because it's going to be, an hour and a half. It's not just a walk around campus. It's a
Mm-hmm.
conversation about the school and your children. We make it clear that there will probably be a number of families there. We do send out the reminders, and we get a fair number of no-shows, but because we're doing 2 a week, if someone's interested, it's pretty easy to show up and
Yeah.
participate in one of these things. We don't go to a lot of effort. I've definitely done the big dog and pony shows like you're talking about, Phil. But generally, the intention of these tours is we always have coffee, we always have refreshments. We got toys for the kids to play with in the office while we're talking. We have a comfortable place. If it's a little school like the one I'm involved with now, Newgate, usually it's just going to be one person. If we get too
Yeah.
many, I'll call the office and I'll say, someone ought to join me, so that we
Mm-hmm.
don't come into a classroom with these 10 people. But we'll commonly have between 4, sometimes 2, but commonly 4 and 10 people twice a week. One in the high school campus, one in the lower school campus. And a lot of them, of course, are looking ahead. They've got very little kids, or they might be looking for immediate admission. And we do go around, we see the whole school, and if they're little
Mm-hmm.
kids, we encourage them to also visit the high school so that even though it's a different campus, different day, the idea is if you're serious about our school, you probably ought to get a feeling of what it would be like if your child falls in love with the place and goes through high school. We really encourage that. We
Yep.
do have ambassador parents. We give them a list
Mm-hmm.
of reference parents that they can call that have agreed to that. We do invite them to come back for multiple open houses if they want. We encourage them, if they want to observe, to schedule a time to observe. If they want a private session, we make it very easy. Just let us know that you want to speak to us privately. And of course, after the tours, we have time allowed for if someone wants to just hang around. We'll typically do that right then and there. And it's worked really well over the years. It's something I'm pleased with. And if you went to the Newgate website, you'd see it just very easy to book it. Say that I want to call back or I want a tour.
Yep. So I'm working with a couple schools that do, one of them does something called Take a Look Tuesday. They do open houses and they do tours, but they have every Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock, anybody can come by. So from 9 to 10, the admissions person has nothing on her schedule. Sometimes nobody shows and sometimes people do show. Another school does Welcome Wednesdays, pretty much the same thing. Just as a way of trying to get more traffic, to get people onto campus. But and at Kingsley, we're still doing the open houses just about monthly, and they're a big deal. They're similar to what you just, Phil and Tim, talked about, where people come into the elementary building, which has a lobby. The head of school gets up and does an overall presentation. There's coffee. Sometimes as children, we recommend not having children because it's just harder to communicate. And we were really pushing what we called the foundational decade. When you come into Kingsley as a toddler, we expect you to stay till 6th grade. We just said that over and over. And then after we did the intro, we would have breakout rooms for toddler, children's house, and elementary. And then teachers would do a 10 or 15-minute overview of the program, just highlighting it. And then the final piece was that one more room, there was a Q&A with teachers and a couple of older parents and a couple of older students. And that was optional, but we really went all out because we figured if we get them here, let's keep them for 2 hours. And I want them to know everything about Kingsley before they leave. And it worked pretty well. We didn't do the tours. You know, if somebody said, oh, can you walk me through the building? We always ask them to come back for tours, or if they came in on a private tour, we'd say, please come to the open house because you'll get to see the whole picture, and then meet the teachers because teachers did the presentations. They didn't meet all of them, but whoever was on that month to do it. And we had a PowerPoint and it was pretty systematized and I thought it worked great. But it's a lot of energy and effort for sure. That's why we divvied it up, you know, like every teacher wasn't there every month for sure.
So can I ask, how do parents respond when you're having them buy into a decade worth of education? I mean, this is like, again, something we're moving into, because we're trying to regrow our kindergarten program. So, you know, having that buy-in, if you're not here just for infant, you are going, we want you all the way through for the formative, the completion of your Montessori cycle. How did you find that? And I know, Phil, because you have that lineage of the school, how is that working? Do they buy
try, Phil?
Or the message, I should say?
Ours personally is, you know, trying to get families to buy into a specifically Christian school education. So we're a Christian school for Christian families. And so when they're buying in, they should know what they're getting and they should hopefully like what they're getting. We do transition kind of times, particularly like going from elementary to middle school. We have a 5th grade move up day where the 5th graders go up to our middle school and meet with all the different middle school teachers and hear about what they can look forward to in middle school, to kind of give them that eagerness, because by that point it's more up to them than it is their parents about whether they stay or not, especially when they get into high school. And we do the same thing for 8th going into 9th grade, an 8th grade move up day where they get to interact with some of the high school teachers. We do expect that, you know, some of our pre-Kers won't stick around for kindergarten, but we get a lot of families that don't start till kindergarten. So we are kind of combining our pre-Ks with our kindergartens, but the expectation that that current students get first seats in our next grade level, and then prospective families get anything that's additional to that, kind of gives them that incentive to re-enroll early and incentive to stick around if they know that there's a possible waiting list, and they need to do that re-enrollment before that waiting list runs up, starts up. But it is an overall, like, it's the program. It's not just the class. And why people stay is the overall program. Hopefully.
Yep.
Yeah, Sandy, I would add to that, I'd be happy to talk to you about it, but just being able to say out loud what the vision and mission is, if you want them through kindergarten, I would say it in every single meeting. I did at Kingsley. I said, we want you here through the 6th grade. In my mind, I knew not everybody would stay, but I never said, but some people don't. I just said, that's really what our goal is, and I want you to know that. And then you could do the moving up sessions during the year. What changes from infant and toddler when they move into Children's House? And then in Children's House, most of the schools will bring the parents of the 3 and 4-year-olds to come in and learn about the kindergarten year, because usually it's a little bit different. It's bigger work, and there's some other things that are incorporated. And I think because I think that, if you're bringing parents in at infant and toddler, the more you can communicate with them about the bigger picture, because they have no clue. They have a baby who's 12 months old, right? So they 365 days old. That's like brand new, right? So I always looked at it that way and said, I need to give them information, and I can't force it on them, but give it to them over and over. And also do a parent panel of some of the parents who've been there for a few years to welcome the new parents, and they talk about their experience. But you have to make sure you have the parents who stay through kindergarten, if that's the mission, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's very tricky. So again, what
Yeah.
we know is ideally what we're looking for is parents who we know they're going to bond with other parents who they feel comfortable with. Ideally, we want to collect parents who actually bond with the school, and then their bonding with other parents leads the prospective or the new parent to feel bonded to the school too, and it becomes a self-reinforcing process. So again, the classic thing back in the 60s and the 70s, when I started in Montessori, the norm was take the parent, slow them down, have them do an hour of observation, have both parents be involved, get across right from the beginning. This is a 3-year program minimum, because in those days they didn't usually have elementary. It's very, very vital. If you decide to apply, you need to have thought through, are you really willing to commit to staying through kindergarten? Obviously, it didn't always happen, because the typical class still looked like a pyramid. The goal was that, and what they really did was they got the child to visit, they did things to get the parents to know the teachers and other parents early and often, and they built community step by step.
Yep.
The other thing to remember is in the early days, at least in our schools, Montessori schools, it was originally, for the most part, a parents' movement, parents who wanted something different for their children. I think in a lot of schools, Christian schools would be a good example, there's that same sense of we're making a choice of wanting something different. And it's that community and program, not just the teacher, that causes people to choose to apply and to choose to hopefully engage. So today, again, I just want to acknowledge as we close, originally Clint was supposed to be today's talent. He was going to talk about social media construction, and Clint's contacted us just before we began to say that he is out of town. He wasn't able to get on this week. So we're assuming next week he will be with you. That's what we'll do. And I'll ask Clint to formalize that. Meanwhile, the recordings are normally posted on the Montessori Foundation YouTube channel. They're normally sent out to you along with a transcript by Clint. Last week, you didn't get one because the recording flopped, which is why I asked Clint to redo the social media one. But there's so many topics. So just to remind you, this series of topics is about every different thing that can happen in making the phone ring, doing the dance with the prospective parent, trying to figure out, are they and their child the right fit? Are you going to be happy with each other? Tuition strategies, boy, that's coming up soon. That'll have to be one of our topics.
Yeah, that would be a good
How do you
one.
structure tuition? What do you charge? What will the market bear? Getting feedback from parents, ways of building community, because we want attrition ideally to be no more than 5% a year. That's the goal. And for a lot of us, that's a goal that seems far off because we might be losing 20, 30, 40% of our total population in a year. So again, our goal is we start where we start and we work towards that. And this, again, this webcast series includes video production, mass media, free newspapers, newsletters, communication, what tools like AIMS are best out there. And we're very committed to helping people to look honestly at any software or any solution, and not just AIMS and not just the Montessori Foundation as a consulting source. The goal is to create a platform where we really talk things through. Safe space.
Yep. Yep. I know space is time is running, but I just got an email from the Commonwealth School that's here in Boston, and it's grade 9 to 12, and they call it, "Dear Renee, you may not expect a community to be so warm and welcoming, but Commonwealth School is anything but common." And they give a couple of facts, and they say, learn more at our virtual open house, Sunday, November 12th, 2:30 to 4:30. And you can click on, and then they say, we welcome your questions ahead of time if you have some. And then they give a couple resources, and I've attended a few of these. That's why I'm on the mailing list. And they actually have teachers and students talk about a couple of parts of the program, and it's quite effective. But I just think everybody's trying to get people to get their feet wet who might not walk right into the school, but it's just another way. So it just came through. So I just wanted to share that.
That's great.
Okay,
Well,
great.
Any last words from anyone? Feedback, topics, suggestions? All right, then I will say bless and release. I will see you in 2 weeks because I'm off next week to Dubai. And so for 2 Tuesdays, I'll be flying, either flying out there, flying back. So it'll be Clint and hopefully Renee and whoever else they drag along, and we'll continue the process.
Okay, great. All right. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for joining. Bye.